Ethan Smith slammed the stack of documents onto the desk, his breath quickening. The words on the pages blurred before his eyes, but he couldn't look away. It was an old report, revisiting the factory closure he had once believed to be a smart business decision. But now it was no longer just cold, lifeless numbers. A horrifying truth unfolded before him. The factory he had shut down was where Megan Harris, his wife, had worked to support herself and her young daughter. That decision hadn't just destroyed the livelihoods of hundreds of families. It had pushed the woman he now loved deeply into hardship. Ethan stood frozen in his office, the dim glow of the overhead light casting sharp shadows across his tense features. For the first time in his life, he felt the crushing weight of true regret pressing down on him. But the worst part? He had no idea if Megan could ever forgive him once she learned the truth. If you've ever faced a moment where the past came back to haunt you, this story might resonate with you. Hit follow to join us on Ethan's journey of redemption and true love. Thank you for being here, and inner peace. Ethan Smith was always the most confident man in the room, the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the United States. He accumulated success and wealth like no one else. At 40, his life seemed perfect: luxurious mansions, sports cars, and a constant stream of people eager to flatter him. To Ethan, the world was a game of power and control, a game he always won. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan and a few friends found themselves in one of the most unlikely places for someone like him, a local McDonald's. It was an ironic stop, a way to entertain themselves by pretending to live an ordinary life. Sitting around a corner table, his friends chatted casually, but as always, Ethan dominated the conversation. "You've done it all, Ethan," Tyler Harper, one of his oldest friends, said between bites of his burger. "Made millions, won over anyone you wanted. But I doubt you can win this next bet." Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "I'm listening." Tyler smirked, clearly having planned his provocation. "I bet you can't marry a woman who has absolutely nothing to do with our world. And I don't mean models or businesswomen. I'm talking about someone truly ordinary." Ethan frowned as the other friends exchanged amused glances. "Define ordinary for me." "I've got an idea," Tyler said, lowering his voice and discreetly pointing at a waitress cleaning a nearby table. "I bet you can't win over and marry someone like her, that single mom working here at McDonald's. Let's see if you can bring someone like her into your world." Ethan followed Tyler's gaze. The waitress in question was Megan Harris, a 30-year-old woman who had been working at McDonald's to support her 5-year-old daughter, Emily. Megan was composed and hardworking, never letting the stress of demanding customers or the exhausting routine of a single mom affect her. To most people in Ethan's circle, she was invisible. "You want me to marry the waitress?" Ethan asked, disbelief and amusement lacing his tone. "Exactly. And I'll give you $2 million if you pull it off. No contracts, no schemes, it has to be a real marriage," Tyler said, his eyes gleaming with the challenge. $2 million was pocket change to Ethan, but the challenge itself intrigued him. Ethan Smith never turned down a bet. For him, it was never about the money, it was about winning. And Megan, with her simple life so far removed from his reality, seemed like the perfect opportunity for another victory. $2 million? Ethan smiled, raising his soda cup. "This will be easy. Get the check ready, Tyler, because I'm going to win." His friends laughed, convinced they were witnessing the beginning of yet another triumph for the unstoppable Ethan Smith. Deep down, Ethan felt a new sense of excitement. Megan would be a different kind of challenge, and he liked challenges. He watched her more closely as she cleaned the tables. Her light brown hair was tied in a neat ponytail, and she wore little to no makeup. There was something in her eyes that intrigued him, a mix of weariness and resilience. It was clear she worked hard to keep her life on track. When she approached to clear some empty cups, Ethan decided to make his move. "Megan, right?" he asked, flashing a confident smile. She glanced at him briefly, her expression neutral. "Yes. Can I help you with something?" "Call me Ethan," he said smoothly. "I don't think you've served me before." Megan blinked, surprised by the remark. "I've worked here for months. You probably didn't notice." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Probably. But that changes today. How about we grab a coffee sometime? She raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. Sorry, I'm working. Ethan didn't give up, keeping his smile. Not now, of course. But you must get a day off, right? We could chat a little. Megan stared at him for a few moments before replying. I need to get back to work. And with that, she walked away. Ethan felt a wave of frustration. She hadn't responded the way he expected, but that only made him want to try harder. Megan wasn't like the other women he was used to charming with just a few words. There was something about her resistance that challenged him, and Ethan never backed down from a challenge. As she returned to collect more empty cups and toss them in the trash, he kept his eyes on her. I'm persistent, Megan. You'll find that out. I'll keep asking until you say yes. She gave a polite smile, unaffected by his charm. Good luck with that. That response only motivated him more. What had started as a simple bet among friends now felt personal. Ethan Smith always got what he wanted, and he was determined to win. Megan, just like he had won every bet before. As Tyler and the others finished their meals, Ethan gave Megan one last glance before leaving. He knew that the next time he saw her, he would be more direct. If there was one thing he understood, it was that no one resisted his charm for long, and Megan Harris would be no exception. Ethan Smith had never backed down from a challenge, especially after Tyler had raised the bet to $2 million. This wasn't just about the money, it was about pride. He was set on getting Megan Harris, the McDonald's waitress, to accept his invitation and eventually marry him. With each passing day, Ethan felt more focused on his goal. Deep down, he knew the bet was superficial, but the idea of being turned down bruised his ego. Let's have some fun with those who only read the comments. They won't get it. Type McDonald's in the comments. Only those who made it this far will understand. On the following Tuesday, Ethan returned to McDonald's at the same time. He watched Megan as she attended to other customers. She was professional, always focused and quick. Something about her seriousness intrigued him. It was probably exactly what made her different from the women he usually met. Megan seemed strong, capable, and completely uninterested in anything he had to offer. Ethan was used to women trying to impress him or earn his attention, but Megan, she seemed indifferent to it all. When Megan came to his table to take his order, he intercepted her with a confident smile. Hey Megan. I thought maybe you were expecting to see me again. She raised her eyebrows, not hiding her surprise. Didn't know you came here so often. Well, I think I'll start coming more often, he said playfully. You know, great service and all. Megan shot him a skeptical look and jotted down his order. But before she could leave, Ethan decided to try once more. So, how about that coffee? Just to get to know each other better, he insisted. She studied him for a moment, clearly annoyed by his persistence, but she took a deep breath. Look, I appreciate it, but I'm really busy. My life doesn't leave room for casual meetups. Ethan realized that if he kept using a casual approach, she'd push him away even more. Changing tactics, he lowered his tone and said, I get that you're busy. I promise I'm not here to make your life harder. I just want to get to know you better. She looked ready to turn him down again, but something in Ethan's calm and serious expression made her hesitate. Finally, Megan let out a small sigh and agreed. All right, Ethan. But it'll be a quick coffee. I don't have time for much more than that. It was progress. And for Ethan, that was enough for now. He just needed a small opening to begin his plan, and now he had one. Megan looked at him once more, then finished the last sip of her coffee and stood up. Well, that was a quick coffee, just as I said. Ethan smiled. So why don't we do this again? Maybe next time, we'll have a more relaxed conversation. She studied him for a moment, considering the offer. After a brief pause, she gave a small nod. Maybe. As she walked away, Ethan remained seated, watching her disappear through the cafe doors. He had taken the first step, and now his curiosity about her grew stronger with every encounter. Ethan was used to achieving his goals quickly, and with Megan Harris, he felt that same urgency. After that brief coffee meeting, the image of her and her sincere words about her daughter lingered in his mind. The bet with Tyler still echoed in the background, But as the days passed, it became more of a fleeting incentive. Something deeper was pulling him toward Megan, and even Ethan couldn't fully explain the growing attraction. In the weeks that followed, Ethan started showing up at McDonald's more often. He kept things low-key, making sure not to overdo it, but he seized every opportunity to exchange a few words with Megan. Little by little, she got used to his presence, and their conversations became more personal, touching on details about both their lives. One afternoon, Ethan realized it was time to take the bet to the next level. He knew that if he kept things casual with quick chats and coffee dates, Megan wouldn't consider anything serious. He needed to make a bold move, something that would show he was genuinely interested. That quiet afternoon at McDonald's, as Megan arranged trays behind the counter, Ethan approached her. "Megan," he began, trying to sound as sincere as possible. "I've been thinking a lot about us. I know this might sound sudden, but what do you think about taking this seriously?" She looked at him, puzzled, her brows furrowing. "Taking what seriously?" Ethan took a deep breath, knowing that being direct was his best chance. "Marriage." Megan let out an involuntary laugh, stunned by the unexpected proposal. "Are you serious? I barely know you." Ethan exhaled slowly, trying to stay composed, but there was tension in his voice. "I know it sounds crazy," he admitted, "but I feel like there's something special between us, something I've never felt with anyone else. Maybe it's because you're not from my world. Maybe it's because I see something real in you, someone who lives a life with true purpose." Megan shook her head, still skeptical. "Are you really suggesting marriage to someone you barely know? What kind of reality is that?" Ethan realized he was losing control of the situation. He knew he needed to be more convincing. "I'm not joking, Megan. I know I come from a different world, and I know this might sound absurd, but I want to give you and Emily a better life." Megan took a deep breath, torn between the instinct to reject him and the strange pull she felt toward him. It was hard to believe that someone with his lifestyle would be genuinely interested in her. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw a glimmer of something, hope, maybe. "I'm not asking for an answer right now," Ethan said, sensing her hesitation. "Just think about it. I don't want to pressure you, but I believe we could make this work." Megan studied him, trying to understand the intentions behind his words. "I'll think about it," she finally said before returning to her work, still perplexed. The following days were filled with reflection and doubt for Megan. She kept questioning Ethan's proposal. After all, he was a man from a world she didn't understand, and her reality as a single mother and waitress seemed incompatible with the life Ethan offered. However, the idea of marrying him and what it could mean for her daughter, Emily, stirred something inside her. As unlikely as it seemed, the proposal could offer a future she'd never be able to provide on her own. A week later, Ethan showed up at McDonald's again. He waited for Megan to finish her shift, and when she stepped outside, he called out to her, smiling with a mix of confidence and nervousness. "Megan, have you thought about what I asked?" She took a deep breath, her expression serious. "Do you really think this could work, Ethan? We're from completely different worlds. I'm a waitress with a young daughter. My priority is her and always will be. I'm not here for games." Ethan nodded, pulling out a small velvet box he had prepared. Opening it, he revealed an elegant but simple ring that sparkled under the night's light. He knew anything too flashy would intimidate her, so he chose something that reflected sincerity. "Megan, I'm serious," he said, holding the ring between his fingers. "I want you to see this as a chance for us to build something together. We could give Emily a different kind of life, and if you say yes, I promise I will never let you down." Megan's heart pounded. The proposal felt surreal, but Ethan's expression was so determined, so genuine, that for a moment, she believed it. "Why me, Ethan? With all your money and your world, why are you here asking me this?" she asked, still in disbelief. Ethan smiled, reflecting on a truth he couldn't fully grasp himself. "Because you're different from anyone I've ever met. Because maybe, for the first time, I see something real." She fell silent, her eyes fixed on the ring. Her hands tightened slightly as she wrestled with her emotions. "This feels so unreal," she whispered. "But I can't ignore that I have a daughter to think about." Maybe I'm being foolish, but I'll accept, for Emily's sake. Ethan stepped closer, carefully slipping the ring onto her finger. Warmth spread through him as the ring settled into place. I promise I'll make this worth it, Megan. She exhaled, still surprised by her decision. All right, Ethan. I'm trusting you on this. Ethan smiled, relieved, knowing he had taken one step closer to winning the bet. For Megan Harris, accepting Ethan Smith's marriage proposal felt surreal but necessary. Ever since she became a mother, every decision she made had been for Emily's well-being. And now, by taking this bold step, her goal was clear: to secure a safer future for her daughter. The transition into this new life happened quickly. Ethan took care of everything with his usual efficiency, ensuring that Megan and Emily moved into his mansion. The house was grand, with high ceilings, luxurious furniture, and everything Megan could never have imagined. Every corner exuded wealth, but to her, it felt cold and impersonal. Megan tried to adjust, but the differences between their worlds were glaring. In those first days, she felt like a visitor in a life that wasn't hers. Ethan, though considerate, kept a careful distance. He seemed genuinely interested in making her feel at home, but his endless meetings and responsibilities prevented a deeper connection. The first dinner together at the mansion highlighted these differences. They sat at a long dining table, with Ethan at the head, Megan a few seats away, and Emily between them. Ethan watched Emily with a mix of curiosity and unease. The little girl looked around, captivated by the silver cutlery and the sparkle of the crystal glasses. "Do you like it here, Emily?" Ethan asked, trying to start a conversation. Emily nodded shyly. "Yes, it's big, like a princess's house." Megan smiled at her daughter, trying to keep her grounded. "It sure is, sweetie. But remember, this is just a place for us to live. Our life is still the same." Ethan picked up on the caution in Megan's words and wondered if she felt out of place. He tried to lighten the mood by sharing a childhood story about how he got lost in one of his family's many properties, but despite his efforts, Megan remained reserved, as if she was still trying to figure out her role in this new setting. As the days passed, Megan gradually began to understand more about Ethan's world. He was a man consumed by his work, constantly surrounded by meetings and influential people. Meanwhile, Megan spent most of her time taking care of Emily, overseeing her daughter's school activities, and trying to adjust to the new life Ethan had built for them. Ethan made an effort to spend time with Megan and Emily in between his meetings, but his presence often felt distant. He asked about Emily's routine and tried to participate in family activities, but the gap between their lives remained undeniable. One afternoon, while Megan was helping Emily with her homework, Ethan stepped into the living room and stood there for a moment, watching them. There was a simplicity in their mother-daughter relationship that he had never experienced before, a natural, effortless closeness. "Need any help?" he asked, his tone slightly hesitant. Megan looked up at him, surprised. "Do you know anything about school assignments?" Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Maybe not, but I can try." Megan smiled, and for the first time, Ethan felt like he had truly connected with her. He sat down beside them, attempting to help with Emily's homework. The little girl giggled at his mistakes while answering the questions correctly. That light-hearted moment felt like a small bridge between their vastly different worlds. But despite that small progress, Megan still harbored doubts about Ethan's true intentions. She knew their marriage hadn't started in the most conventional way, and she still sensed that something between them remained unspoken. Ethan, on the other hand, was beginning to experience an internal shift he hadn't expected. At first, it was all about pride, a bet to prove he could win any challenge. But now, Megan and Emily's presence was making him question the real purpose of it all. That night, as Ethan was getting ready for bed, he noticed Megan sitting at the edge of the bed, lost in thought. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice soft with concern. She let out a deep sigh and looked at him. "Ethan, I think we need to understand what exactly we're doing here. We're not a normal couple. We don't have a real story together. And even though you've been thoughtful, I still feel like we're just trying to fit into something that might not work." He sat down beside her, his gaze sincere. "I understand, Megan. But would you believe me if I said I'm trying to figure this out too? I want this to work. Even though we didn't start in the best way, we can build something real here." Megan studied him in silence, unsure if she could trust his words. Everything about Ethan seemed too perfect, and she knew his intentions weren't always clear. But despite her doubts, she wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could build something real. Over time, he might learn to appreciate the simple life she valued so much. "For now, I think we can just try," she said with a sigh. "But I need you to be honest with me, Ethan. If this isn't real, if this is just an experiment, I'd rather end it now." He nodded, his expression serious. "It's real, Megan. I can promise you that." His response gave Megan some peace of mind, but the words still felt vague. Building a life together was proving to be far more complicated than she had imagined. But at that moment, she decided to give Ethan, and herself, a chance. As time passed, something unexpected started to happen to Ethan Smith. Living with Megan and Emily was affecting him in ways he never could have predicted. At first, he knew this marriage was just a bet, a challenge to prove his ability to win. However, the more time he spent with Megan and her daughter, the more he found himself changing. Megan approached life in a way that stirred an admiration in Ethan that went far beyond any relationship he had ever known. Material achievements, once so important, now seemed empty compared to the authenticity and dedication Megan displayed every day. The way she cared for her daughter and managed everything at home revealed a strength he had never found within his social circle. One evening, while they were having dinner together, Ethan realized he was opening up to Megan more than ever before. He talked about his childhood, the weight of family expectations, and the pressures of being a young CEO. Megan listened attentively, and for the first time, he felt like he didn't have to prove anything. He could just be himself. "I don't think I've ever had anyone I could really talk to about these things," he admitted, surprised by his own vulnerability. Megan smiled softly. "Sometimes, Ethan, you just need someone to listen. Someone who doesn't expect anything in return." That simple statement hit him hard. He realized how accustomed he was to relationships based on interests, where everything was always an exchange of favors, status, or power. But with Megan, things felt different. She expected nothing from him except honesty, and that completely disarmed him. Ethan's change deepened over time. Now, he found himself looking for ways to spend more time with Megan and Emily, savoring the small moments in daily life that he once overlooked. One weekend, he surprised them with a trip to the park, something that felt ordinary to him but was an exciting experience for Emily. The little girl ran across the grass, laughing and shouting as Ethan tried to keep up. Megan watched them, smiling warmly, and Ethan found himself caught up in the moment. He had never felt such lightness, such simple joy. Deep down, he began to question the real reason for their marriage. That initial bet no longer made sense. He knew he wasn't there for money or pride anymore, but because he felt something real. During the outing, Ethan had a heartfelt conversation with Megan while Emily played nearby. "Megan, I know we started this in a strange way, but I'm trying to figure out what's happening to me," he said, looking at her with a mix of confusion and determination. She looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "I never thought I'd feel this connected. Spending time with you and Emily has become the best part of my day," he admitted, glancing away. "It sounds crazy, but you two have made me see life differently." Megan smiled slightly, surprised but still cautious. "I know our beginning was complicated, but I feel like there's something special here too, Ethan. But we need to be honest with each other. If this isn't real, I'd rather not continue." Ethan took her hand, looking into her eyes. "It's real, Megan. I've never been so sure about anything in my life." As the days turned into months, Ethan's transformation became even more visible. He started distancing himself from the friends who had encouraged the bet and even rearranged his work schedule to spend more time at home. Tyler and the others noticed the changes and soon began questioning him about what was going on. One night over dinner, Tyler confronted him directly. "Ethan, what's going on with you? You're pulling away from everyone and changing completely." Ethan took a deep breath, tired of his friend's insinuations. "I think I'm realizing what really matters." Tyler laughed disbelievingly. Is this all because of the bet? I thought it was just a joke. Ethan felt irritation rising, his chest tightening. I bet you'd find this funny, but it's not a joke to me anymore. I want things to work with Megan. Tyler studied him for a moment. So it's serious then? Yes, it's serious. And if you can't understand that, maybe you should focus on your own life. Ethan said, ending the conversation. That night marked the end of Ethan and Tyler's friendship. Ethan knew he couldn't hold on to his old relationships, and severing ties with that social circle felt like cutting the last string tethering him to the shallow life he once lived. Now, he understood that what he truly wanted was a real life with Megan and Emily, even if it meant leaving behind the world he had always known. When he got home that evening, Megan immediately noticed something was weighing on him. They sat together in the living room, where she listened as he opened up about feeling lost and disconnected from everything that once seemed so important to him. I feel like I'm drifting away from everything and everyone I used to care about, like everything I once valued is slipping through my fingers, he sighed, his shoulders heavy with the weight of his thoughts. Megan placed a gentle hand on his. Maybe you're just finding something real, Ethan. Sometimes, we have to lose ourselves a little to truly find our way back. That conversation was the final push Ethan needed. For the first time, he was ready to leave everything behind and move forward with Megan. He knew that with her, he had found not only true love but also a way of living that fulfilled him in ways he had never imagined. The months he spent with Megan and Emily had led Ethan to countless realizations. His transformation wasn't just evident in his actions but also in how he saw the world around him. He spent more time at home, focused on simple activities, and distanced himself from the social circles he once deemed essential. But on one crisp autumn morning, an unexpected discovery brought everything rushing back. Stirring memories he had hoped to forget. He was in his home office, reviewing contracts, when an old document caught his attention. It was a news article about a past acquisition his company had made, a small factory that had been shut down years ago. As he glanced at the date, memories of those events resurfaced. He remembered that at the time, he had ordered the factory's closure to cut costs and increase profits. To him, it had been just a business decision, but for many people, that decision had changed everything. A cold dread crept into Ethan's chest as he read further, his unease growing. He continued digging into the aftermath of the factory's closure and discovered that hundreds of employees had lost their jobs. The town where the factory was located had suffered economically, forcing many families to start over from scratch. Back then, he hadn't thought about the people behind the numbers, only the impact on the company's bottom line. Ethan's grip on the report tightened, his eyes scanning the details of the affected town. And then, like a punch to the gut, the truth hit him. It was Megan's hometown. His hands began to tremble, his heart pounding against his ribs as he pieced the story together. The decision he had made years ago had directly impacted her life. That was why Megan had ended up working at McDonald's, struggling to raise Emily alone. Even though he had never intended it, he had been the one to cause her suffering. The realization shook Ethan to his core. He spent the rest of the day unable to focus on anything else. The thought that he was, in part, responsible for Megan and Emily's hardships consumed him with guilt and regret. But how could he tell her? How could he admit that he was the reason behind so much of her pain? For days, the revelation tormented him. The distance between him and Megan grew. She noticed he seemed withdrawn and preoccupied, but Ethan tried to hide his inner turmoil, terrified of how she would react to the truth. However, he knew he couldn't keep this secret forever. Finally, on a quiet evening, Ethan decided it was time to tell Megan everything. They sat in the living room after Emily had gone to bed, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken words. Ethan knew this was the moment. Megan, he began, struggling to find the right words. I need to tell you something important. Something from my past. She looked at him, surprised by the seriousness in his voice. What is it, Ethan? Did something happen? He took a deep breath, forcing himself to speak. Do you remember the factory you used to work at before we met? The one that shut down. Megan's face darkened as she recalled that difficult time. Of course, I remember. It was one of the hardest times of my life. I was pregnant with Emily and had to face everything alone. Ethan looked away, shame twisting in his chest. Megan, it was me. I was the one who ordered the factory to close. His words hung in the air like a heavy weight, and Megan's expression shifted from confusion to pure shock. She blinked, trying to process what he had just said, then stared at him with a mixture of disbelief and heartbreak. You did that, she whispered, her voice barely holding together. Yes, he admitted, his voice filled with guilt. At the time, it was just a business decision. I was focused on profits and didn't think about the people it would affect. If I had known, if I had realized what it would do to you, I would have never made that choice. Megan slowly stepped back, as if trying to physically distance herself from the weight of his confession. Every struggle, every sleepless night spent fighting to provide for her daughter and hold on to her dignity, all of it now tied back to him. The betrayal was unbearable. She took a sharp breath, her eyes welling with tears. So everything we've been through, everything, was because of you? You're the reason I ended up in that situation? The reason I had to work as a waitress and fight to raise my daughter? And now what, Ethan? Do you expect me to just forget all of it? Her voice sliced through him like a blade. Ethan took a step forward, desperate to reach her, but she recoiled, fury and pain burning in her eyes. Megan, I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to make things right. I want you to forgive me. She let out a bitter, hollow laugh. Forgive you, she spat, her voice laced with anguish. How do I forgive the man who destroyed my stability, only to show up later pretending to be my savior? This is selfish, Ethan. And I don't know if I can forgive you for that. Ethan felt her words like a punch to the gut, his body stiffening under the weight of her anger. But he knew he deserved it. His past had caught up with him, and the price he had to pay was steep. He watched as she turned and walked toward the bedroom, every step heavy with resentment and pain. Megan, he called after her, his voice breaking. I would do anything to make this right. And Emily mattered to me. I don't want to lose you. She stopped in the doorway, looking back at him one last time. Ethan, you didn't win us over with grand gestures or empty promises. I stayed because I believed you were sincere. But now, I see that maybe all of this was just another one of your business deals. And with that, she disappeared into the bedroom, leaving Ethan standing alone in the living room, suffocating under the crushing weight of his own guilt. Words wouldn't fix this. If he wanted to earn back Megan's trust and rebuild what they had, he would have to prove, through real actions, that he had truly changed. After the devastating revelation about the factory closure, the tension between Ethan and Megan became unbearable. Megan could barely look at him. Their conversations, once filled with warmth and laughter, were now marked by silence and pain. Every time Ethan saw the disappointment in her eyes, he felt lost, his body tense and heavy with regret. The next morning, Megan was still processing the whirlwind of emotions. She tried to hide her pain for Emily's sake, keeping her composure in front of her daughter, but the anger and betrayal still clung to her. Knowing that Ethan was responsible for the hardships she had endured wasn't something she could easily forget. Now, their entire relationship felt like a cruel irony. A few days later, during dinner, Ethan gathered every ounce of courage he had to start a more direct conversation. Sitting at the table, his voice unsteady, he began, Megan, I know I've hurt you, and I understand if you can't forgive me. But would you give me a chance to prove that I've changed? She looked at him coldly, her eyes filled with pain and fury. A chance, Ethan? You took everything from me, and now you want a chance to prove yourself? You think you're a good man, don't you? But don't you see how convenient that sounds? Megan's voice was laced with bitterness, her eyes sharp with distrust. Ethan took a deep breath, fighting the desperation clawing at his throat. I know you have every right to be angry, and I deserve it. But Megan, since the day we met, I've changed. I want to be better, for you and for Emily. I will do whatever it takes to earn your forgiveness. Megan shook her head, exhaustion and frustration evident in her expression. It's too late, Ethan. I let you into my life and my daughter's life because I believed you were different. But in the end, you're just like everyone else I've ever known. She stood up and walked away, leaving Ethan alone at the table, his body weighed down by guilt and regret. He knew words wouldn't be enough. If he wanted to make things right, he had to take real action, something that would prove his sincerity beyond empty promises. In the days that followed, Ethan made a decision. He sought out the people who, like Megan, had been affected by the factory's closure. He traveled to the town where the factory once stood, met with former employees, and listened to their stories, the hardships they had endured because of his decision. Facing the consequences of his own actions was painful, but he knew he had to confront the reality he had created. After hearing dozens of stories, Ethan decided to establish a support fund for the former factory workers. He set aside a significant portion of his wealth to help their families and create new opportunities for them. He knew this wouldn't undo the past, but it was a first step in proving he was truly committed to change. When Ethan returned home, Megan was still avoiding him, but he was determined to talk to her. One evening, as Megan finished putting Emily to bed, Ethan waited for her in the living room. As soon as she entered, he called out to her, his voice calm but firm. "Megan, I know you're hurting, but I need to tell you what I've been doing. I've been trying to make things right." She crossed her arms, skepticism clear in her eyes. "And how exactly do you plan to fix the past, Ethan? With money? That won't erase what you did." "I know it won't," he said, keeping his composure, but there was a quiet determination in his voice. "But I went there. I spoke with the former employees, listened to what they went through, and I'm creating a fund to help them rebuild their lives. I know this doesn't erase what I did, but it's my way of trying to make up for the pain I caused." Megan stared at him in silence, surprised by the sincerity and conviction in his words. Though the wound was still fresh, she saw a glimpse of genuine remorse in his eyes. As much as she didn't want to admit it, his effort to right the past started to chip away at her anger, leaving behind a quiet uncertainty. That night, as Ethan remained in the living room, Megan returned to the bedroom, her heart torn in two. She couldn't bring herself to forgive him just yet, but she also couldn't ignore the fact that he seemed sincere in his attempt to change. The months they had spent together had revealed a side of Ethan that seemed far removed from the man who had ordered the factory's closure. But the weight of the past still stood as a difficult barrier to overcome. The next day, Megan decided to talk to Ethan again. She found him in his office, focused on some notes. She hesitated for a moment before speaking, but she knew she needed answers. "Ethan," she began, catching his attention, "I heard what you said about the support fund. I know you're trying to make things right, but it's still hard for me to understand." He looked at her, his expression serious. "Megan, I know I may never deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know I'll do whatever it takes. I'm willing to change my entire life if that's what it takes to build something real between us." She watched him in silence, absorbing his words. Though the pain hadn't disappeared, she saw a different man standing before her. Maybe, just maybe Ethan was changing. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Ethan," she said softly, her voice cautious. "But maybe we can see what happens." Her hesitant response gave Ethan a glimmer of hope. He knew the road ahead would be long and that earning her forgiveness wouldn't be easy, but he was prepared to face any challenge to prove he deserved a second chance. Before they could continue their conversation, the office door suddenly burst open, and Tyler walked in, wearing the same smug grin he always did. "Oh, so you two are still here, all cozy together?" Tyler smirked, his eyes flickering toward Megan. Ethan frowned, irritated by the intrusion. "Tyler, now's not a good time." Tyler ignored the tension in the room, his gaze full of amusement. "So, Ethan, did you tell her about the big bet?" Megan looked confused, turning to Ethan, who felt panic rising in his chest. "Tyler, stop." Ethan's voice was unsteady, but Tyler just laughed, continuing as if he hadn't heard him. "You see, Ethan and I bet a small fortune on whether he could marry you. $2 million, actually. Didn't he tell you? What a shame. I really thought you two were becoming a real couple." Megan's expression shifted to a mixture of shock and pain. She stepped back, feeling the ground collapse beneath her feet. She turned to Ethan, waiting for him to deny it. But his silence confirmed everything. "Ethan, is that true?" she asked, her voice trembling. Megan, it wasn't supposed to be like this. At first, it was a bet, but I changed. I started to care, really care. He tried to explain, but his words felt hollow. She stepped back further, devastation in her eyes. First, you destroyed my life with that factory. And now I find out our marriage was just a bet. Megan left the room in tears, and Ethan knew in that moment that he might have lost everything all at once because of his own lies. Megan walked out of the mansion with a shattered heart. Tyler's revelation was the final blow, overflowing an already deep well of pain and betrayal. To her, every moment she had spent with Ethan now felt like it had been built on a lie. Not only had he ruined her past, but he had deceived her again, promising love and change when their marriage had been nothing more than a game, a bet for his entertainment and Prida. Ethan stood there, watching as Megan disappeared into the night. Every step she took echoed his failure. He wanted to chase after her, to explain, to tell her how much he had changed and that the bet had meant nothing after he truly got to know her. But the words felt weak, incapable of undoing the brutal truth she had just uncovered. In the days that followed, Megan kept her distance, ignoring every attempt Ethan made to contact her. She needed time to process, to understand how she had trusted and opened up to someone who had never deserved her trust in the first place. Meanwhile, Ethan was falling apart. The mansion, once a symbol of his success, now felt empty, every corner echoing Megan and Emily's absence. Every message he left on Megan's phone went unanswered. He knew he needed something far more meaningful than an apology to reach her again. Determined to win her back, Ethan searched for a way to prove that his feelings were real. Instead of relying on money or power, he decided to part with the thing that meant the most to him: his company. He spent several days in secret negotiations with investors and advisors, facing tough questions and pressure, but he remained resolute. Eventually, when the deals were finalized, he was left with nothing but his name, Ethan. No company, no status. He wanted to prove to Megan that his life no longer revolved around power and position, that he was ready to start over with her. Once the paperwork was signed, he went to a friend's house, where he knew Megan and Emily were staying. The weight of the moment settled on him as he anxiously waited outside, unsure whether she would choose to speak with him. Finally, she appeared in the doorway, her face clearly marked by fatigue and skepticism. Megan, know you might not believe me, but I've come here to say something important, he began, unable to meet her eyes. I've sold the company, the one where everything started, where I made the decision to shut down the factory. I'm no longer a part of it. She looked at him, surprised, hesitant. Ethan, I don't understand how this changes anything. Do you think by just removing everything, the lies will disappear? No, Megan, he answered, his voice shaking. I know this can't erase what I've done. But I realized I can't be with you while I'm still tied to that life. I want you to know that today, my priorities are you and Emily. I'm ready to build something real, something solid, even if I have to start from scratch. Megan listened carefully, her eyes filled with doubt and a flicker of hope. She took a deep breath, her emotions filled with caution. You've had every chance to be honest from the start. Every promise, every gesture of love now seems meaningless. Ethan nodded. Accepting the harsh truth in her words, Ethan spoke with determination. I know I may never deserve your forgiveness, but I'm willing to do anything to earn back your trust. Believe me, Megan, I've changed, and this change is for you, for Emily, because I understand what truly matters. She stared at him in silence, her eyes seemingly weighing the sincerity in his face. A part of Megan still loved him, but the betrayal weighed too heavily to overlook. She needed time and space to decide whether she wanted to open her heart to him again. That night, after their long conversation, Megan returned inside, and Ethan, feeling a mix of relief and fear, drove home. He knew he had done everything he could for now, and the next step was in Megan's hands, with her ability to forgive. In the following days, Ethan kept his distance but continued to send occasional messages to Megan, always respectful and careful of the space she needed. He didn't force her. Instead, while waiting, he focused on rebuilding his life based on the values she had taught him: simplicity, empathy, and honesty. Finally, After a few weeks of reflection, Megan reached out to him. She agreed to meet for one last conversation. Sitting together, she looked at him and spoke calmly. "I won't pretend that what you didn't hurt me. I know you're trying, Ethan, and I can see that you've changed, but for me, rebuilding trust will be a long and difficult process." "I accept that," he responded, his voice steady. "I'm willing to wait as long as it takes because for the first time, I feel like I've found something real and I won't give up on it." Megan nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. Despite all the challenges ahead, she had decided to give the man Ethan was striving to become a chance, not for what he had, but for who he was now, someone who was beginning to prove that he could change. Megan's heart was torn between the love she still felt for Ethan and the wounds he had inflicted. She had decided to give him a chance, but she understood that rebuilding trust wouldn't be easy. Since their last conversation, Ethan had shown patience and sincerity, but Megan knew that she would need more than just gestures to trust him again. Each step forward would be slow, and any misstep could destroy any progress. Ethan understood that he couldn't rush this process. He kept in regular contact, tending to the small needs of Megan and Emily, showing genuine care for both of them. Megan saw that he was truly trying, but the doubts about the gamble and the lies still haunted her. Deep down, she feared that everything he was doing was just temporary, another promise Ethan wouldn't keep. A few weeks later, Ethan invited Megan and Emily for a picnic in a park near the city that he had recently discovered. He planned a simple lunch with food he had prepared himself, knowing that Megan would appreciate the gesture. When they arrived, Megan was surprised by the simplicity of the moment, a stark contrast to the lavish lifestyle she was accustomed to with Ethan. Seeing this other side of him, his true self, she gained a new perspective on him, and for a brief moment, she felt relief, almost forgetting the scars as Emily ran around and played with the ball. Ethan and Megan sat on a bench, watching the little girl. "Thank you for coming," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "You've been patient with me." She smiled lightly, still cautious. "I'm just trying to understand what really has changed, Ethan. But I have to admit that since you sold the company, I've seen a side of you I never knew existed." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on Emily playing. "I realized that the world, with all its wealth and power, those games of influence, doesn't bring happiness. You and Emily, you've given me something real. I understand now that I need very little to be happy." Megan listened intently, and bit by bit, she felt the weight in her heart lessen. The sincerity in Ethan's words was clear, and she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time he was telling the truth. During the outing, Ethan suggested a simple guessing game to make Emily laugh, and as Megan observed how they interacted, she noticed the genuineness in his affection for the little girl. Emily beamed, and each smile from her made a part of Megan's heart soften. She felt as though the arrogant man who had once only cared about himself was slowly disappearing, making way for a kinder, more compassionate man. By the end of the day, as they prepared to head home, Emily had fallen asleep in the back seat of the car. Ethan drove calmly, glancing at Megan and saying, "I know this is just one day, and it doesn't erase what I've done, but I hope this can be the start of something new between us." She took a deep breath, thinking about everything they had gone through. "I can't promise it will be easy, Ethan, but if you keep going like this, maybe one day I'll trust you again." Ethan nodded, feeling a quiet relief, like a small light in the midst of a long, dark tunnel. He knew that Megan's forgiveness would be a slow, challenging journey, but her response meant that there was still hope. The weeks that followed were a process of gradual rediscovery. Megan remained cautious, but slowly, moments with Ethan and Emily began to bring ease to her life. They started seeing each other more regularly, and with each passing day, Ethan revealed more of the person he was working to become. He shared simple plans, spoke about the volunteer work he had started with families in the city, and showed genuine interest in Emily's learning activities. Megan could see that he was truly committed to changing, and it made a significant difference in her heart. She still remembered the betrayal and the gamble, but Ethan's consistent actions seemed to slowly wash away the pain. He was becoming the father Emily had never had and the man Megan had always hoped for, even though she once thought it was impossible to find. Finally, on a quiet evening when they were together at her home, Megan decided it was time to say what she had been holding back from the beginning of this second chance. "Ethan," she began, her gaze hesitant, "I want you to know that what you did with the factory and the gamble still hurts. It's not something easy to forget." He stared at her in silence, his heart heavy, but she continued to breathe steadily. "You believe that I'm changing, and no matter what happens, I'm willing to try again. But I need you to be genuine from now on. I can't handle another disappointment, and I can't let Emily go through this again." Ethan took her hand, a lump rising in his throat. "Megan, I promise I'll never be that way again. I'm here for both you and Emily, and that won't change." She smiled, touched for the first time in a long while, feeling like she could trust again. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was a beginning, a real opportunity to rebuild. She knew challenges still lay ahead, but she was willing to face that journey with Ethan, believing the man before her was sincere and determined to prove his worth. The new beginning between Ethan and Megan was carefully built through every conversation and each kind gesture. Week after week, month after month, their relationship gradually grew. Megan remained cautious, but Ethan's sincere gestures, support, and constant presence slowly earned her trust. As for Emily, she had come to see Ethan as part of her life, and she didn't hide her affection for him. Over time, Ethan became a steady father figure for her, someone she knew would always be there, supporting her in everything. The trust between Ethan and Megan was slowly built. Ethan respected Megan's boundaries, careful not to promise more than he could deliver, always demonstrating his commitment through actions. He poured his heart into the fund supporting the former factory workers, actively involved in Emily's school needs, and invested his time into meaningful activities that brought purpose to his life. His conversations with Megan grew deeper and more sincere, and in the end, he felt at peace with the simplicity he had once resisted. On a cold December evening, Ethan invited Megan and Emily to a Christmas dinner at his home, now more modest after selling the company. The table was simply set, but the joy and peace in the air made the gathering special. Emily, with her childlike excitement, opened her first gift, laughing and running around the house, while Ethan and Megan sat, watching and smiling. Megan looked at Ethan, the warmth of the moment making his face glow. "The last few months have been amazing, Ethan. I think we've built something real, something I never thought could exist." He smiled, taking her hand across the table. "Megan, I've never been happier. Everything I thought I needed has been replaced by this, by you, by Emily, by our life together. Thank you for giving me a second chance." She sighed, feeling the emotion in his words. "You've shown me that change is possible, Ethan. And I believe that today, you're the man who deserves to stand beside us." They spent the evening talking about the future, sharing dreams and plans for a simple but meaningful life. Ethan told her about a community project he planned to invest in, something he wanted to start to help struggling families, inspired by what he had learned from Megan and Emily. At the start of the new year, Ethan took an important and surprising step. He proposed to Megan, this time with sincerity and truth. He asked her to marry him in a small ceremony, witnessed by close friends and family, where he made a heartfelt promise to be the partner and father that Emily and Megan deserved. When he looked at Megan as they exchanged vows, Ethan knew that this commitment was not driven by pride or competition but by the genuine love he felt for her. Megan accepted, smiling through tears, knowing that after all the pain, she had found someone who truly understood and cherished her. She felt ready to start a new life, free from the shadows of the past, with sincere hope for the future. From that point on, their lives were marked by small but truly happy moments. Ethan continued his work with the community project, while Megan spent time helping other women like her who had faced hardships. Emily, now surrounded by love and stability, grew up happy, knowing she had a family who would always be there to support her through every challenge. A year after the wedding, Megan and Ethan received news that moved them deeply. They were expecting a baby. The arrival of this new member brought even greater joy to the couple. For Ethan, it was the realization of a dream he hadn't even imagined. When he held the baby for the first time, tears of happiness flowed from his eyes. Megan, overwhelmed, watched the tenderness he showed the child, knowing that their family was finally complete. Megan knew that after all the pain, she was living the new beginning she had always dreamed of for herself, for Emily, and for the child she now shared with Ethan. This new life, built on sincerity and love, was everything she had ever wanted, and with Ethan by her side, she felt whole. Ethan squeezed her hand, smiling. "Thank you for trusting me, Megan, for giving me the chance to become a better man." She looked at him, smiling in return. "Thank you for proving that I was right to trust." Together, they walked forward, now a united and complete family. Ethan knew that the bets, pride, and money had been replaced by something far more invaluable: true love and the certainty of a new beginning. Megan had done the right thing by forgiving and trusting Ethan again. What do you think about her decision? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Your opinion matters to us. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories like it. Thank you for watching. This story shows us the power of change and second chances. If you were in Megan's shoes, would you be willing to open your heart and give someone another chance? Or have you ever had to overcome past pain to move forward? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice might be the encouragement someone needs to find trust and hope in life. If you feel this story brings value, don't hesitate to share it with friends and family to help spread the message of change and hope. Thank you for following and supporting. Let's create positive changes in life, step by step, but with great meaning. May you always find joy and strength to change and renew yourself. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to receive the latest updates. The stories are collected from various sources and do not represent any individual or organization. They are shared with the intention of spreading human values in life and have been rewritten with the support of AI. If there are any mistakes, kindly overlook them with understanding.